myself.
I told you I would deliver.
Yeah. All right, so I guess I haven't got to introduce myself. I actually did a decent job of writing that up nicely down.
Thank you.
So I see this a lot in my counseling practice. So as I'm speaking, just want you to imagine a man who spent 40 years working every single day of his life. Then he retires, kids have grown, his routine has disappeared, his co-workers have disappeared, and slowly all the social connections he did have start to fade away. And the question that starts to go through his mind is, what next? So I'm going to try and be brief. I can talk about this all day, and I know because I've seen myself do it. But I'm going to try and talk a little bit about men's mental health and how we got to where we are. Tom had mentioned, why do men not talk? Or why is it so tough for us to express ourselves emotionally? Well, it begins with our socialization. It starts when we're, this high. And socialization creates our view of the world and our expectations for boys and men and how we should behave. So what do we do with our boys and men? Where does this all start? What do we give in our boys? We give them the man kit. So somewhere along the line when they're young, we don't explicitly take them aside and have a party for them, but they receive the man kit. This is a series of emotions that they can feel and what they shouldn't feel. Right? Being tough, being competitive. Right? Anger being really the only emotion that is okay. Now when I say this, there's going to be people in here who say, well, I didn't have that experience. I'm using evidence-based and broad strokes. Right? There are going to be people that kind of lucked out and didn't go through that, but the majority of people, this is going to resonate with them. So what does the man kit do? Where does that leave our men and our boys? What do we tell them? What's in there? Any of these look familiar? Right? Boys don't cry. They man up. You got to be tough. Throw some dirt on it. Be strong, silent. Be dominant. Always be in control. Asking for help is a sign of weakness. You handle your own business. And at all costs, you have to win. Now, we think that some of us are immune to that. Some of us, we know better than that. Right? So I'll tell you a quick little story. My son is down, Reed is actually there too, again, Miss Reed. My son is down in the back there, and I coached him in baseball, I guess about 10 years ago. And he got hit by a pitch. So I'm dad, I'm in the dugout, I'm doing this work a long time and trying to promote men's mental health and tackle what it means to be a man and redefine that. So I know better. So anyway, he gets hit by the pitch. Dad pops out, coach pops out of the dugout and comes over, and what do you think the first thing that I say to him is? I don't go crying. And then I caught myself, and I realized, you can't stuff the words back in. But it's so ingrained in us. It's so bred into us. That was my automatic response that came out. And I worked in it. And I knew better. And if I had to do over, I wouldn't have said it. But at that moment, I'm in the sports world. That's how I was raised, and that's what came out. So none of us are immune to this. None of us. It's something we have to learn and grow from. You know, as older men, you know, it's something that we've had to grow up with, we've had to try and deal with, it's gotten us through a lot of sports, but we can do an awful lot better job with the younger guys as well, and bring them up a little bit differently, but that's for another day. So what does that do to our men? What does it do to our boys as they grow older? They get to about middle age and they have a lack of social capital and network. Social capital and the number of friends you have, those deep-rooted connections. Those people you can count on and have those real good discussions with when you need them. Right, the lack of these social networks is one of the main reasons why we need male-specific networks, why we need mensheds. How do you open up to somebody you've been competitive with your whole life? It leads to feeling increasingly lonely and isolated, and especially as we age. I know for men it's a whole different world, and when I started the Lonely Man Project, I remember talking to one lady, and she couldn't understand it because her husband had a couple of nights out a week. Right? They were struggling. But you know, he went out twice a week with the boys, played hockey. Now, you know, my wife was here as well, and when she goes out for a night out, she'll have a glass of wine with the girls. Right? They might bash their husbands a little bit if need be. Right? Talk about the kids. Right? Get everything on the table. None of them feel alone. They're all going through similar things, and they come home feeling refreshed. A little bit better. They vented, they got it out. And they're not alone in the world. So this lady couldn't understand how her husband could go out twice a week and not be feeling better. I said, well, let me tell you how this works. I played a lot of sports. You go into a locker room and you got a game coming up, and you see somebody kind of slumped over in the corner. The guys, you can probably back me up on it. Do you go over and put your arm around and say, what's going on? How are you feeling? No, you look at him and say, get the puss off, you got a game to play. And you play the game, and you might even go for a beer by the truck afterwards. But all the conversation is superficial, very high level. So then he comes home, he's wanted to talk, he was looking for an opportunity to have that conversation, discuss what's going on. It never came up. So now he comes home, he's feeling even worse about himself. His wife thinks he should be feeling 100% better. And it causes a problem, a big problem. So stigma. Stigma is still huge when it comes to mental health in general. We are making strides. In men's mental health, it's still a major barrier for people. The combination of socialization and our masculine norms, not talking, keeping things to yourself, our gender-owned stigma to keep men from talking to those even closest to them. I mean, how many guys roll over and tell their wife, man, feeling pretty weak today? I see it in my counseling all the time. And it results in deteriorating relationships and further social isolation. I've had guys, I can't tell you how many guys that have come in to see me as a counselor because their wife contacted me and see if I would work with them. Yeah, no problem. I'll send him an email and take it from there. And then he'll come in and he'll sit down and say, so, what's going on? Nothing. Everything's fine. Oh. Because your wife contacted me and said, you needed some therapy and could I see you? Oh yeah, she said if I didn't get counseling that the marriage is over, and that's fine to do. Well, I'd hate to see what the prices look like. I get that a lot. You gotta realize men self-stigmatize. Like nobody's gonna treat a man worse than he treats himself. Mental health issues creep in there. You got things like depression, you got two devils on your shoulder, and you're telling yourself you're a loser and you're less than, you're not strong. Day in and day out for months. And they do that because, as Tom said, they don't think that they can power through safety as a weakness, not an illness. So they internalize all this. And of course, with the stigma, the socialization, they can't tell their buddies. Now, again, we are making strides, but this is the common story that continues. And our suicide rate in Newfoundland and Labrador is, across the country is about 75% male, and in Newfoundland and Labrador, a lot of years, we're at 80% male. And so stats speak for themselves on this. So what does that lead to? It leads to men delaying seeking help. Seeking help means there's something wrong with you. Internally. You're broken. Can't be fixed. So many men delay seeking help until it's severe. Depression's severe. They might have lost their job. You could be addicted to something. You could be alcoholics. The wife might be ready to leave. Domestic violence is a big issue that you see. So the cost is amplified, financial and family impact. It all falls apart. You see it time and again. And when I talk about men's mental health, the idea with the Lonely Man Project, that actually came from 3 women who were suffering at home with the kids because the men in their lives, they were masking what was going on. Everybody thought everything was great. It wasn't. And the family at home was walking on eggshells. This guy who, honestly, they didn't, 3 of them that I talked to about the Lonely Man Project, they didn't know they had depression. How do you fix something when you don't know you have it? But it's not just about men, it's the whole family impact when we talk about men's mental health. So that leads us to where we are now. We have a loneliness epidemic. Loneliness is not about having people around you, necessarily. You could be lonely in a room full of people. It's about having connection. It's increasingly known as a public health issue. You'll see more about it in the news as the year goes on. It can impact people of any age, but many of the older adults feel isolated through transitions. You might have lost your partner. You might have declining health. Your mobility might be taken away. Men have smaller support systems than women, as I just mentioned. And the scary part is loneliness is linked to depression, heart disease, cognitive decline, and just overall a lower quality of life. It's not just about feeling sad. This is a major problem. When I started the Lonely Man Project a few years ago, my wife and kids, who were a bit smaller back then, they started the Lonely Man Stockings Project in support of it. And so every Christmas Eve, they deliver stockings to people. There's a couple organizations that they do. And then people out in the community that are nominated by other people in the community or that we find out about. And we just drop them off stockings through community donations. This year, VOCM picked up the story, and demand went through the roof. Like, we're well over 100 stockings that were requested and nominated for people. Thanks, Tom, for coming out. Really appreciate it. Some of the stories that we heard through the Lonely Man Project, through the Stockings Project, they're heartbreaking. Like you hear of a gentleman who lost his wife in November to May. And then 10 hours later, got a call that his mom had passed away. He lives in a basement apartment and he's having a great mobility. For the first time ever, we dropped off stockings at the Health Science Center. People are lonely. There's a lot of men out there, but not just men. We dropped off stockings to women too, as people are identified. But in this particular initiative, we're looking at men, and there's a lot of lonely men out there. And a lot of them, you know what? They would sooner die than deal with their mental health and tell you that they're lonely. We've got to change the messaging. We need programs like men's sheds in order to do that. So you got to understand that aging often changes a man's identity. Right? Men build their identity through their work life, right? Through career, providing for family, what they can do physically, and their independence. Right? They're CEOs, they're dads, they're brothers, they're all these other things. So when aging brings retirement, and health changes, or changes in your living situation. Maybe now you're living alone for the first time in 50 years. Men can feel the loss of personal purpose and usefulness. So it's important to know that mental health in older men is strongly tied to purpose and contribution, not just emotional support. I've had guys that have come into my counseling practice and they'll sit there, and one guy in particular, he literally asked me, he said, "Why am I still here?" So I don't know, because you're 58. He had no idea what he's left for him to do. He's raised his family. He retired, he's got a pension. Kids have moved on. As he said, like, his job is done here. He was lacking purpose. He no longer had meaning in his life. And again, that's at 58, it starts then, and even younger. So we're talking about social networks, and as we age, women generally maintain broader social networks. So for women, they tend to have multiple close relationships. It could be siblings, it could be friends that they've maintained relationships with over the years. A lot of men, you'll find, rely heavily on one primary relationship, that being the spouse. Right? Their wife is their best friend, they do everything together, they don't do much outside of that. And if the relationship ends, they've suddenly lost their main emotional support system. And they're all alone. And that's a dire situation. So the result is that men are at greater risk of severe isolation after major life changes, particularly the older they get. As Tom and lovely Tina had mentioned, the suicide risk increases with age. For years, my age group, middle-aged man, I can't even believe I'm saying that, that was the highest bracket for suicides. I never understood it. I do now, that I'm in there. I get it. But where the younger gentlemen have been coming up in the suicide rates, now we're seeing the seniors and the senior men. And we need to do something about that. We need to do it now. Some risk factors include social isolation, chronic illness, a loss of a partner, financial stress, and a huge one is feeling like a burden. As I mentioned, for a lot of men, it's the productivity, what they can contribute, their usefulness, their purpose. And if they feel like they can't contribute to anything anymore, and they feel like a burden on their families, their society, we're getting a lot of negative outcomes. We can do something about that. So I want you to know that purpose protects mental health. Say it again, purpose protects mental health. Research consistently shows that older adults who have meaningful roles and social engagement and opportunities to contribute have better mental health and a longer life expectancy. So some protective activities, which you would find in, say, drawing a men's shed, some volunteering, mentoring, skill sharing, right? Community object projects and hobby groups. And Brian's going to talk a lot about the men's sheds, but there's no one men's shed. Like, you know, look at my hat, on the logo, you've got tools, but you know, my wife will attest to the only tools I should ever use are a knife and fork. The knife is questionable on times. I'm not a handsy guy. I'm not, you know, music, yes, but everybody's got their own thing. So the diversity amongst the sheds can be just as diverse as our population and our interests. There's no one way to do these things, which is beautiful. Activity-based programs work best. So many men are connected naturally through doing things together using the shoulder-to-shoulder approach, rather than talking directly about emotions. So programs involving building, fixing, gardening, learning skills, and working on projects often create natural environments for conversation and support. And I'll tell you one last story before I finish up. I know this to be true. I had a friend of mine a few years ago that went through a divorce. And And he's the hunting, fishing, gathering type of guy. You know, he works during the week, he's in the woods on the weekend. And he's not exactly touchy-feely and emotional. So we started having some conversation, and I realized that because I'm useless with my hands, and he's not, that if I had him doing projects, our conversations were getting deeper and deeper. So suddenly I had a floor to put down, or my wife had a floor for him to put down. And then there was a window to fix. I'm gonna need some help with the deck, as I sat in a lawn chair and watched him. But all the conversations were getting deeper because he was actively doing something. Right? We were shoulder to shoulder. We weren't sitting across from each other in a chair. We were working shoulder to shoulder on something. And I really clued in, like, this really works. All right? We're busy doing a project, and he's able to open up, and we can work on his mental health. But we're actually having to talk about his mental health. That's what Man Sheds can offer. It takes the pressure off. So community is a major protective factor, and the strongest protective factors for men's mental health later in life are belonging, purpose, regular social interaction, and feeling valued. When men feel useful and connected, mental health outcomes improve dramatically. That goes across the board, but especially in the older population. When you can make men feel useful again and reconnect them, give them a purpose, their mental health improves. So the key takeaways I want you to have today: loneliness is one of the strongest predictors of poor mental health in men, and we've got an epidemic. Men's mental health in later life is often less about clinical treatment and more about connection, purpose, and belonging. Now, I'm not saying that older men don't go to counseling and don't come see me as a therapist. Not saying that, but a lot of men get an awful lot of that connection, purpose, and having a place that they belong, and the camaraderie with other men. Programs that rebuild social networks can play a powerful role in protecting men's mental health. We want to move from crisis management, we want to be into the prevention business. Men's Sheds offers us that. And so that's exactly in Newfoundland and Labrador where Men's Sheds come in. Thank you.